Hey everybody, welcome back, or welcome to the first video of creating a video game ideas. So, creating a video game is the first thing you really need to understand are create ideas. Ideas are the most important and beneficial things of creating a game. For example, one of the best examples I can think of from a video game would be Xenoblade Chronicles, where they created the statue, two titans clashing blades, and basically the people lived on the dead corpses of a titan itself. But because really, ideas are kind of the building blocks of when you're first creating a game. Overall, it can come up. Think of what you want. Think of how you really want to create it. For example, for like a game I would like to create, basically a game around a carnival. Carnivals kind of help you create this beautiful world building and build the world itself. Because ultimately, think of ideas how the game starts, how the story goes, and all that. Because really, you create ideas first, and then you go into storyboarding. Storyboarding is basically, how do you want the story to go? How would it follow basically a 3-act structure? Basically, the the beginning, middle, and end of a story. Basically, of the hero's journey of like Bilbo Baggins from Lord of the Rings, or not Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. Basically, he's a reluctant hero who didn't want to go on this journey until basically a happenstance of a wizard came to his door, placed a symbol on it, and Bilbo basically got his hero's journey. And we get basically at that. Basically, creating a idea in the storyboarding are the two most important when you're first creating a game, because you're creating a true story itself. But some other ideas of of games is Zelda with Zelda Gaiden. Basically, the building blocks of Majora's Mask right here, and everything else. Because literally, the game started off differently than how it ended up. And Zelda Gaiden is used in a lot of Zelda games. But one of the perfect examples of scrap concept of in the game was the Fierce Deity mask, and the mask that originally was supposed to be the adult Link in the game. Because Fierce Deity was just scrap code where they still had it in the game, and they're like, we could use this. Because they only had 1 year to develop Majora's Mask. Ultimately, the next thing I will be talking about will be world building. World building is basically how do you want to have this world set up and make it feel alive. For one of my favorite examples of world building is in Zelda, because of the Clock Town here. Because Clock Town is separated into 4 sections, 5, but the basically follows the constellation, or a compass, basically north, south, east, and west, and each area is different. And they're following the idea of when a carnival's coming, the carnival time, because they're celebrating the new, I forget the full-on carnival because it's been a long time, but basically starting of a new year. Basically North Clocktown is a park area with a slide. You don't see it in the image, but there's a cave right behind here with the Deku playground. South Clocktown is the central hub with the iconic clock tower in Clocktown. And then basically that's where the festival starts in, and all that. North Clocktown East Clocktown is basically the local shop, the tavern, and stuff like that. And of course, West Clocktown is the shopping district of it. But each of the districts symbolize something in the world and how it builds the world itself. Because character and world building are kind of co-linked together. or like Link in general is a silent protagonist. Basically, he has no personality because he's supposed to be a symbol of you, well, and everything else. One like each of the characters like I can think of, Skull Kid wearing Majora's Mask itself is a symbol of a great character in world building. Of he's a part of the history in the world of creation of Termina, and the Four Giants. Others building of like world building, I say Xenoblade because of the two titans, how they live on it, and the idea of ether. Basically, they use it as medicine, machinery, fuel. Well, and of course, Ikami. Ikami in games, most games use gold. Zelda has its rupees, and Mario has coins. But when you're creating a game, think about like the economy and everything about it. And now, when you're creating a game, one of the main things you really need to think about is creating picking what genre of game, because really, type of game or genre is just as important. One of my favorites would be RPGs. Let me find it. Here it is. RPGs, because there's so many different kinds. My first game I'm going to create was originally supposed to follow this concept. Sorry, my first try. And I decided to change it to be action adventure, like Legend of Zelda, and games I had, like Assassin's Creed. Because really, gameplay after anything else, creating a game, you need to have a solid base to how you want this to be set up. Story and world building, when you're creating the ideas, is important. But when you get to the next part, prototypes are basically, how do you want this game to play, and pick from there. Of course, there's so many different types of games you can pick to help. Like, one of the most common and a lot of people figure for non-gamers are first-person shooters of basically Halo. Sorry about the light, it's from the sun and we don't have anything block out. And basically is Halo, or Halo 2, the case I had, was a beginner's guide for gamers who weren't gamers at the point. And every gamer starts somewhere, and when you're creating a game, think about how this world works, how the gameplay is, and everything else. Like a first-person example from like a first-person adventure game would be Metroid. Again, sorry about the lag again. Metroid, because Metroid is basically same as who goes to a world and you feel like you're alone, because theming, world building, and like other stuff like music in like creating a game is because you have to think about the atmosphere of the area. Like when I think of a great atmosphere, basically like Majora's Mask was the whole dark and depressing, but the hidden truth was hope. Others basically were basically like Zelda, well not Zelda, like Metroid is you feel alone and isolated. And there's so much more. Like when you're thinking about enemies, like what are the like creatures that live in this world really feels like. You really have to think about that. Well, in other things. So there's other examples from me I can think about, like from creating stuff, because when you're creating a game, really, you have to think about like, okay, I know, for example, from Avatar: The Last Airbender, like the mail system, basically how the railings on that, basically you send out packages on that. And really, that's it, right, for the first video of creating a video game. Next time we will be talking about prototypes. Prototypes when you're creating the engines you might want to use, and get your ideas wrote down and stuff like that. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.